everybody, John King with Summit Funding. Thank you for joining me for my Financial Friday live update, where I give you a financial topic every single Friday, except last Friday when I was traveling with my son back east. Had a great trip and glad to be back in town and broadcasting to you again live today. So today's topic is one I get a lot of questions about, and that is first-time homebuyers. A lot of people come to me and say, John, I want to buy a house, but I'm not a first-time home buyer because I owned a house 10 years ago. Or, hey, John, I'm buying a house and I'm super excited. I'm a first-time home buyer. So I get all of these special benefits that I get of being a first-time home buyer. And the truth is, there is so much misinformation out there about what is a first-time home buyer. Why does it matter? What's the purpose of the designation? And so really my goal today is to spend 20, 30 minutes with you tops, going through an understanding of what the heck is a first-time home buyer? Why does it matter? What benefits do I get? How do I qualify as one? So if you have questions about anything, please post them into the chat of whatever platform you're watching on. If you're watching recorded, plug it into the comments section and I'll get back to your comments. But really my goal here is to help you understand the purpose, the definition, and the benefits of being a first-time home buyer. So let's go ahead and get started right now. So first of all, what is the definition of a first-time home buyer? It varies. Pretty much every program has a little bit different definition and how they look at specifically what is a first-time home buyer. But in general, almost every program simply says if you have not done something, and that something changes a little bit, in the last 3 years, then you're fine. So in other words, if you sold your home and haven't owned a home at all in the last 3 years, you should be fine. Especially if your spouse has not owned their home for the last 3 years, you should be fine. So that's the most important thing I want to point out is the 3-year timeline is confusing for people. A lot of people misunderstand the timeline and they think that's based on when you purchased a home. And they would say, well, that's great, John, I'm a first-time home buyer because the last time I bought was 10 years ago. I bought my last home in 2013. Therefore, it's been over 3 years. That is inaccurate. The timeline is not based on how long has it been since you bought. It's based on how long it's been since you owned. Now, maybe the program says it's okay if you've owned a home in the last 3 years as long as you haven't lived there. So that's where the nuances come in. But it's based on when you last owned or resided in that residence that was your primary home is what they're counting. So it's not, if you said, hey, John, I bought my house 10 years ago and I still live there today, you're not a first-time home buyer. It may have been the first time you are buying a home in over 3 years, but you own the home you live in. So you're not considered a first-time home buyer because you've owned the home you live in at some point in the last 3 years. So again, across the board, the definition of a first-time home buyer is always about a 3-year look back. I'm saying, hey, have you owned or your spouse owned or lived in your primary home anytime in the last 3 years? If that is the case, you're not a first-time home buyer. Now, each program has a little bit different definition. Some of them will say, hey, you can have owned a home as long as you didn't live in it. So a first-time home buyer for some loan programs say you're a first-time home buyer if you haven't lived in your primary residence anytime in the last 3 years. Other ones say you are a first-time home buyer if you haven't owned any homes in the last 3 years. The difference being in some situations, you could have moved out of your house and turned it into a rental. Let's say, for example, you were relocated. Right now, you're relocated from your current town to another town in Texas. Your job moved you. And you said, you know what, instead of selling my home, I'm going to rent it out. And I'm just going to rent where I'm living in Texas. So that starts the clock in most situations that, okay, starting tomorrow, when I start renting out my current home and I move into a rental, that starts the 3-year clock. 3 years later, you are considered a first-time home buyer. But please, please, please stick around for the rest of this conversation, because what I don't want you to do is say, okay, John, then I'll wait for 3 years to buy. Because the truth is, the benefits of being a first-time home buyer, they exist. but they're not as good as what you think they are. And there's not as many restrictions to people who are not first-time home buyers. And so do not tune out and say, okay, John, you basically made it clear I'm not considered a first-time home buyer, therefore I'm out of here. The fact of the matter is the benefits we'll get to in just a minute, but they're not as big as what you would think. And so do not just automatically say, great, I'm not going to try and buy a home until I've met that guideline of being a first-time home buyer. All right, so I've got a couple of questions, actually just one. Edwin says, does a duplex or quadplex count as a home? Yes, it 100% counts as a home. The question more is, are you living in one of those units? So again, for some first-time home buyer programs, it says you can't have owned anything in the last 3 years. So that means if you own a duplex or a quadplex, a fourplex, then you're not a first-time home buyer for those programs. But most of the programs simply say, did you occupy that home as your primary residence anytime in the last 3 years? So the question, Edwin, is, did you live there? If you can prove that you lived somewhere else, and be careful about this because sometimes people say, no, I didn't live there, but we're going to look at everything. We're going to look at your tax returns and say, okay, where did your tax returns say you were living? We're going to look at your bank statements and your driver's license and a lot of things. And in most cases, we're going to want to prove where did you live, and specifically proving that you paid rent where you live. Now, that's not a hard and fast rule. You don't have to have paid rent where you're living, but it certainly makes things cleaner if I can prove that, hey, I am paying rent over here. Therefore, it's clear that I'm not living over here. So Edwin, hopefully that helps answer your question. All right. So let's keep going on the definition of first-time home buyer. Again, a little bit different on every program, but in general, the 3-year look back is all we care about. Some programs also look at if you reside in a home that your spouse lives in or that your spouse owns, then you're also not considered a first-time home buyer. The California Dream for All program is one that made that distinction. And it said a first-time home buyer is someone who has not resided in their primary residence, resided in a home they own, or residing in a home owned by their spouse anytime in the last 3 years. So the key here is they're trying to close a loophole that's existed for a long time. And that was somebody saying, hey, I'm married and my spouse and I want to buy separately. So I'm going to buy the home now and we're going to live in there for a year, but my spouse is not going to be on it. Therefore, my spouse didn't own the home that they are residing in. So now a year from now, we can convert that one into a rental and my spouse can buy the next home as their primary residence. And they're again considered a first-time home buyer. That loophole works in most situations, but they're starting to close that loophole. So be careful if you plan for that as being your goal is, hey, I'm going to buy one in my name and then we're going to buy one in my spouse's name. That's great. And it may very well work out. But loan programs can change their guidelines, and some of them have already started closing that loophole. So it's a great opportunity to take advantage of being a first-time home buyer twice, but by the time you go to do that second loan, it could be that loophole is closed. So just be aware of that fact. All right, so why in the world is there a distinction? Like, who cares whether somebody's a first-time home buyer or not? Does it make it a less risky loan on a first-time home buyer? The truth is no. It makes it a riskier loan. The first-time home buyer is somebody that hasn't proven recently their ability to manage a mortgage. They haven't proven their ability to manage all of the repairs and payments that go along with it. And so the fact is that, and Edwin, I see your question. I'll get to it in just a second. The fact is that it's a higher risk loan. So why are we giving special incentives to first-time home buyers? Well, the simple answer is because the federal government believes, and I do agree as well, that stability for a community combined with long-term wealth building comes by having more people be homeowners owning their primary residence. And so if you are looking at a community where everybody is a renter, people aren't going to care as much about investing in that community. People aren't going to care about when they vote. They're not going to vote to build parks and long-term stability within that community because, well, I'm just a renter. I don't really care. I don't plan on staying here long. So it's better for the community to have more homeowners than to have more renters. It's better for the overall economy because homeowners are more stable, statistically speaking, and they contribute more to the economy and they get more out of the economy insofar as the wealth building over the long term, you get significantly more wealth building. So the federal government is building incentives, building programs into place that will allow somebody to have an easier time becoming a homeowner. And that is as simple of a reason why there's a distinction as anything you're going to hear, because it is simply an incentive program. Just like anything we do with taxes, it's all incentives. It's all trying to get you to do something in particular. Why do you get tax breaks? Why do you get a tax break on your mortgage interest? Because the government's trying to get people to become homeowners. Why do you get anything from the government? Because they're trying to incentivize you to do something. All right, so I've got a couple of questions here. I'll start with Edwin's follow-up question. So Edwin's asking about the duplex, quadplex, and he says, what if I put the title of the home under a trust or a living trust? Really, Edwin, you are the primary trustee, the beneficiary of the living trust. It is you in the eyes of the lending world, so it doesn't matter. Now, if you put it into an LLC and you lived in the home for 3 years while it's owned by the LLC, theoretically, you are not the LLC. So could that work if you did it that way? Maybe. But it would have to be 3 full years of living in the home that's owned by the LLC. But also the mortgage couldn't be in your name, because we're going to look at we're going to see a mortgage on your credit report. And that's going to be the automatic trigger that, hey, you've got a mortgage in your name. Clearly you own that, you have an interest in that home. And so I don't think, unless you own it free and clear, that's going to work, because I can't imagine an underwriter letting that slide, knowing that you have a mortgage in your name, even though the property's in an LLC. All right. Annie asks, kind of off topic, how long should you stay in a home after buying to make up for the costs you paid on the loan, especially in this market? Annie, that's a great question. There isn't a timeline. So first of all, the costs that you paid when you bought are what I call a sunk cost. You've spent the money and it is gone. So you don't have a timeline. Now, the question about if you refinance, and let's go back to your question really quick here. If you want to refinance, the question becomes, what's it going to cost you to refinance compared with the savings and monthly payment? So what you paid in the beginning, you can never get that back. It's kind of like saying, look, John, I paid $10,000 in fees to get my 7% interest rate, and now rates have fallen to 3%. But I'm not going to refinance because I haven't kept the loan long enough to recover the $10,000 in fees I paid in the beginning. That's silly, because you might save $1,000 a month by dropping your rate from 7% to 3%, which is really the important calculation, because you say, how much is it going to cost me to do the new loan? Oh, it's going to cost me $10,000 to do the new loan. I know this isn't what you're saying specifically, Annie, but I think I'm going to land this plane, I promise. So it costs you $10,000 to get the new loan when you refinance, and you're going to save $1,000 a month. Therefore, it only takes 10 months to recover on the new loan the cost of the new loan. What you spent to get the loan originally, let's say you bought down the interest rate significantly and you paid a whole bunch of extra fees to get it down to 6 instead of 7. That's still not a reason to hold off on refinancing to get it down to 3. So what you spent before is a sunk cost. So now in your situation, you're talking about selling that home and moving. And what you spent when you bought the house is still a sunk cost. What you have to look at is, what are my new costs going to be? You're going to have commissions to pay to the realtor when you sell your house. You're going to have closing costs to pay to the bank when you buy your new house. And so the question is, how much of your equity that you've built in your home, if any, and equity is a factor of time. The longer you're in the home, the more likely it is that you've built a decent amount of equity. So that's really the key question, Annie. And I'm not sure that I'm answering it as clearly as you would hope. There isn't an answer. It's about looking at, why am I wanting to move? If your job says you have to move to Texas, it doesn't really matter how much you spent on the prior home. And it doesn't mean that you should keep that home as a rental simply because you've just bought it and you spent a whole bunch of money in fees. What you spent before is a sunk cost. It is money that you can never recover. So you can't calculate that into your next decision. What you have to decide is, what am I going to spend going forward? It's an actual economic, sunk cost is an economic term. And if you think about it, it's kind of like, a store. Let's pretend that you own a chain of grocery stores, and you are in the middle of building this grocery store, and you've spent $50,000 building out the grocery store, and you're about ready to finish opening it up. You only have about $20,000 worth of expenses left. But then you realize that everybody in that town moved out. There's nobody left to shop there. So you could say, well, yeah, but I already spent 50 grand to build the store, and it's only going to cost me 20 grand extra to finish. I might as well finish it because otherwise I waste the $50,000. But guess what? If nobody lives there or shop there, you've wasted $70,000. So you cut your losses. And I know that's not exactly what you're talking about either, but it is a sunk cost. There's nothing you can do to change that decision. There's nothing you can do to get that money back. And so you need to ignore that money you spent and focus on what is it going to cost me going forward versus what is it going to benefit me. All right. Hopefully that helps. All right. Let's dive back into first-time home buyer. So I want to cover some myths of being a first-time home buyer, because there's a lot of things that people misunderstand about being a first-time home buyer. The first thing I'll tell you is one of the myths is you must be a first-time home buyer to use FHA. That's just not true. As a matter of fact, what's funny is FHA will do 3.5% down payments even if you're not a first-time home buyer. Even if you own another home, you can't have two FHA loans at one time. But if you bought a home using a conventional loan, and then you turn around and say, hey, John, I want to buy another house, and this time I want to use FHA, that's okay. You can keep that old house as a rental. You can buy the new house FHA. There's some rules on whether we can count rental income from the house you're moving out of with FHA. That's a whole topic for another meeting. But the fact of the matter is, FHA does not care if you are a first-time home buyer. What's very interesting is a conventional loan does care if you're a first-time home buyer, if you're trying to put less than 5% down. Other than some of the down payment assistance programs, conventional loans say, look, you must put 5% down unless you have not owned a home in the last 3 years. So it's a pretty interesting myth that people think I can't use FHA unless I'm a first-time home buyer, when the fact is FHA doesn't care. It's a conventional loan that cares when you're trying to put less than 5% down, as little as 3% down. A conventional loan absolutely cares that you are a first-time home buyer. All right. Annie, real quick, follows up. Perfect answer as usual, John. Thanks for always explaining everything so well. You're very welcome, Annie. Thank you so much for trusting me. All right. So let's go back to myth number 2. And that is you must be a first-time home buyer to use down payment assistance. Now, again, I said a second ago, you must be a first-time home buyer to do a conventional loan with less than 5% down. And that's a true statement, except some of the down payment assistance programs allow you to do a conventional loan with as little as 3% down, and they'll give you a loan for the 3% down. So you're putting 0 down on a conventional loan without being a first-time home buyer. There are programs out there. Now, some first-time home buyer or some down payment assistance programs require you're a first-time home buyer, but not all of them. So when somebody says to me, John, I can't buy a house because I have no money for the down payment and I'm not a first-time home buyer, that's a myth. There are down payment assistance programs out there that allow you to put 0 down payments, even though you're not a first-time home buyer, and it can be a conventional or FHA loan. As a matter of fact, there's a down payment assistance program out there that Edwin was talking about, duplexes and fourplexes. There's a down payment assistance program that will allow you to put a small down payment and get down payment assistance for a 4-unit property if you're going to live in it. You could put as little as 5% down and get down payment assistance to help cover that down payment on a 4-unit property conventional loan. And you don't have to be a first-time home buyer as long as you're going to be living in the property. So really the key thing is do not write off the ability to use down payment assistance if you're not a first-time home buyer. There's lots of programs out there, and some of them require you to be a first-time home buyer. Some of them do not. All right, so let's now talk about some facts about being a first-time home buyer. The first fact is you can sometimes get better interest rates. I'm going to talk in a couple minutes about the Affordable Advantage program. That's a program that allows you to get better interest rates when you are a first-time home buyer. Another fact, there are more down payment assistance programs and grants available if you are a first-time home buyer. So again, I know I'm splitting hairs here because I just said a minute ago that you don't need to be a first-time home buyer to use down payment assistance, but there are extra programs. There's some closing cost and down payment assistance programs like the Wish program that I've done a video about in the last couple of months that provides you matching, 7-to-1 matching. They'll put $7 in for every $1 that you put in, 4-to-1 matching. So they'll put $4 in for every $1 that you put in, but you must be a first-time home buyer under certain income limits. There's another program in the state of California called the HAF program, the Housing Affordability Fund, that allows you to get a grant, 0 repayment required, for up to $10,000, not up to, but exactly $10,000 towards your closing costs if you meet certain criteria, you're part of an underserved community, and you must be a first-time home buyer. So it's important to understand that being a first-time home buyer does give you some extra advantages that we can layer on top. All right, so let's talk about what is Home Ready and Home Possible. So Home Ready and Home Possible are programs that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, Fannie Mae calls it Home Ready, Freddie Mac calls it Home Possible, that allow a first-time home buyer to get less expensive mortgage insurance, to get better interest rates, a little bit easier qualifying criteria. So really, really good program. Have to be a first-time home buyer, and you have to make under 80% of the area median income. So there's a median income for every city and county, and that actually just changed 2 weeks ago. So the median incomes just went up. So if you've looked into any of these programs and we said, hey, your income's just a little bit too high, well, guess what? The median incomes for a lot of the programs just went up last week. So you might qualify now where you didn't qualify before. But Home Ready, Home Possible is one of the amazing programs. The other one is what we call our Affordable Advantage program. And what the Affordable Advantage program does is it says, look, as long as you're a first-time home buyer, making under 100% of the area median income, or if you're in a high-cost area, under 120% of the area median income, you get better interest rates. You don't have to pay for the risk that comes with your, there's a chart, talked about it in the past, that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac come out with called loan level price adjustments. That fee that you are charged as a risk because of the combination of your credit score and your down payment amount, you don't pay for. Those are all eliminated or negated. So you get the best possible terms. You get the same deal as someone who had an 800 credit score putting 60% down payment. They get the best deal. As a first-time home buyer, if you make less than 100% of the area median income, you get that interest rate, regardless of what your credit score is, regardless of the size of your down payment. It's a really, really good advantage that a lot of lenders don't know how to apply appropriately. So if you're a first-time home buyer, let's take a look and see if you're under the cap, depending upon the county you're buying in. It might be 100% of the area median income. It might be as high as 120% of the area median income. And we can save you a lot on your interest rate and your monthly payment through our Affordable Advantage program. All right, so Edwin asks, if I move to a different county in California, can I apply for that county's down payment assistance that I'm moving to? Yes, but that doesn't change the fact that that program is going to look back and say, did you own a home anywhere else within the last 3 years? So the rule for qualifying as a first-time home buyer is not geographic based. You might have owned your primary home, a year ago in Topeka, Kansas, and you're now moving to California. Well, guess what? We don't look at it and say, well, since you haven't owned in California or you haven't owned in this county, we don't care. What we care about is, have you owned a home at all, anywhere in the United States? Okay. If you have, then it means you're no longer a first-time home buyer. So if you move to a different county in California, now be careful when we talk about county programs, because statewide, there's a lot of statewide programs, and then there's specific county programs. Each of the county programs has a different set of rules. And so when you look at those county programs, you might see that that program requires that you have been working or living in that county for at least a certain amount of time. Most commonly I see is a 12-month look back that says, hey, this program is designed for people who have a vested interest in our county, and therefore they need to have lived or worked in this county for the last 12 months. Now, a lot of counties don't have that clause in their down payment assistance programs, but you just need to be aware of that issue. If you're looking to move to a different county, it is some county's prerogative to say this program is only available for people who have been living or working in our county for the last 12 months. So hopefully that makes sense, Edwin. All right, let's go back over here to my last thing I want to cover. And I said I'd be about 25, 30 minutes. We're coming up on 25 minutes. So if you have any other questions, now is the perfect time to post them, because in a minute, I will be wrapping up and doing a summary and asking for any questions you have. So now would be the time, if you're watching live, to post questions. If you're watching recorded, make sure you keep posting those questions, and I will update the answers once I get a notification. So here's the final thing that we have a lot of questions about, which is, does everybody have to be a first-time home buyer? And the answer is sometimes and sometimes not. So for a lot of down payment assistance programs, it says that every applicant on the loan must meet their definition of a first-time home buyer. For other programs, it says at least one buyer must be a first-time home buyer. For example, doing a conventional loan with less than 5% down, one buyer must be a first-time home buyer. So it doesn't require everybody to be a first-time home buyer, but the rules are different for every single program. So be aware that it's not universal, and most importantly is reach out to an expert like me, because I can help you navigate the specifics of each program, and most importantly, help guide you to the program that's going to serve you the best, whether you are a first-time home buyer or not. Whether those benefits are really going to help you or not is really where my expertise is going to come in. All right, so let's go ahead and wrap up. And I've got at least one question right now. If you have more questions, please feel free to post them. So my question right now, Edwin says, can I stack a county's down payment assistance program on top of the state's home buying program? In most cases, no. So what happens is it's about lien position. So for example, the state's programs, the two major state programs are Cal HFA and the GSFA program, the Golden State Finance Authority. Both of those programs record a second lien on the property. And as a matter of fact, the Cal HFA program has one option that records 3 loans on the property. You got your first mortgage for, let's call it FHA at 96.5% of the purchase price. Your second that covers 3.5% for your down payment. And then you can get a third loan from the state of California to help pay for some of your closing costs. By the way, right now, that's a horrible idea, because your interest rate is significantly higher when you do that third loan to help pay your closing costs. But the state of California allows all 3 loans to be done. The question is, does a county program allow their loan to be in a 4th lien position? In most cases, the answer is no. They don't even allow to be in a 3rd lien position. So when you're combining programs, what we have to look at is, what are the rules of both of the programs? And there's 2 major rules we have to worry about. The first rule we have to worry about is lien position. So the WISH program, as an example, does not care what lien position they're in. So theoretically, you could do the Cal HFA program with the 96.5% first, the 3.5% second, the 2% assistance loan as a third, and the WISH program as a 4th, except for the second rule that says there's a maximum combined loan to value. And so there's a limit that says we won't let you owe more than 105% of your purchase price. So if you're at 96.5 plus 3.5, now we're at 100. We've got 2% that is the funds for the closing cost assistance. You have room to put another 3% 4th lien on top of that, but that's it. So you got to make sure you're under the threshold of combined loan amount, because the first mortgage, your conventional or your FHA loan, has a limit that says we're only going to allow you to borrow so much money as a percentage of the purchase price. That's called the combined loan to value threshold. And so you got to worry about lien position, and you have to worry about combined loan to value when we're trying to stack programs. All right. So I got a question from I Think I Know. The question is, can any down payment assistance program beat any new construction loan? That's I'll ruminate on that. I'll give you some thoughts on it, but that's impossible for me to answer without knowing what the construction terms are for the new construction lender. Here's the general answer, though. Builders are giving huge incentives for financing. Why? Because builders don't want to drop the price of the home. So if you think about this, builders are trying to maintain sales. They're trying to keep their staff busy, keep their laborers employed, because builders made a huge mistake in 2008. They stopped building and they lost all of their tradesmen. They lost all their tradespeople. They didn't have people to install, do the framing, and to put the roof on. All those people left and quit and went to another industry. And builders realized, you know what? We need to make sure we keep our people busy so that we have staff for when the market picks back up. The second thing is builders need to keep their price high, because otherwise it causes problems for all future sales in that community. So what they do instead is they give incentives. They give you a deal on, hey, I'll pay a whole bunch of money towards your closing costs. As a matter of fact, builders are doing something called a forward commitment. And a forward commitment means the builder is paying a fee as a one-time fee to the lender to buy down the interest rates, but it doesn't count towards the maximums that sellers can contribute because it wasn't bought down on your behalf. It was bought down as a bulk transaction. I know that gets a little bit complicated. Hopefully I said it in a pretty simplified way. But the bottom line is builders are throwing huge amounts of money in financing incentives to buy down your interest rate, to pay for your closing costs. And builders are doing that because their only other alternative is to lower their price, and they want to keep their price high. Because as soon as the market turns, they can stop giving those incentives and they can have the historical data for the appraiser to say, hey, our houses have been selling at this price all along. So they don't have issues with comparable sales. They don't have upset homeowners that say, hey, you just sold me my house and it's going to close escrow and finish construction in 3 weeks. And that same house is being sold for $50,000 less right now. I want you to lower my price or I'm canceling. Well, guess what? If they don't have to publicly disclose how much they gave in incentives, but they do have to publicly disclose the sales price. And so there's a lot of reasons why a builder is going to throw a bunch of money at you. All right. So what next thing you said is I got an estimate 2 weeks ago with a 5.5% interest rate. That's a forward commitment. That's the builder having bought some money, because rates are nowhere near 5.5. Rates are at 6.5, 6.75 right now. So I think I knew. I know. You may think you know, but I know. That's a better deal than you're going to get with any down payment assistance program. And it's specifically because the builders are keeping the price high and they're giving away some of the profit. Instead of lowering the price, they're giving it away to you through financing incentives. Now, here's the deal. You have to be careful about overpaying for that home, because that 5.5% interest rate sounds great today. But what about in a year or 2 or 3 when rates drop to 4? Now you're going to refinance it anyway, but you paid more for the home potentially than you needed to, because the builder is saying, hey, I'm going to keep the house price up here and I'm just going to give you all of this extra money. But you didn't use that extra money for very long, because that 5.5% interest rate is only good until rates get low enough that you're going to refinance it. And then, as I told Annie earlier, now it's a sunk cost. And so it really doesn't benefit you to have gotten that 5.5% interest rate if you paid $25,000 more for the home than what you could have spent for a resale home, or you could have spent for a home in a different builder's subdivision. So don't get so drawn in by the low interest rates. The builder understands that's going to appeal to people, an emotional reaction, says, hey, I'm being logical, I'm getting a great interest rate. That interest rate is only great until new rates get lower. It's kind of like if we think back to 2021 and somebody's really upset because, oh my gosh, I have a 3.25% interest rate and all of my friends got 2.99 and it's just not right and it's not fair and I want a lower interest rate. Well, guess what? Now that rates are at 6.5, you're super happy you got 3.25. You don't really care whether it was 2.99 or 3.25. You got a really good interest rate. So hindsight's 2020, and the value of your interest rate is only as important as what the replacement rate is that you can get. And if you're looking at in your situation, I think I knew, as you said, when you got that estimate for the 5.5% interest rate, the fact of the matter is that rate sounds really, really appealing now. But if a month after you purchased the home, rates fell to 4%, then you didn't get any benefit out of it because you're going to refinance right away to the 4% interest rate. You should. And that's where the sunk cost comes in. Who cares that you lost that money? But guess what? It means you could have theoretically bought the home for less. All right. Well, I appreciate you commenting that it was a clear answer. It was a complicated way to get there. There's a lot behind it. So I'm glad that it was clear and that you understood it. But the bottom line is builders give really good incentives right now, and you're never going to get a better financing deal from anybody else other than the builder in most cases. But if you can get a better deal on the price of the home, that's better than getting a financing incentive. And so be careful about the benefits you get and what you're negotiating for, because it may not benefit you very much. The other thing I'll tell you real quick, if you're negotiating and you have a choice with a builder, get a temporary buy down instead of a permanent one. If they'll take the same dollars and apply it as a temporary buy down, now you get all of the benefits, even if you refinance in a year or so. You're going to get a bigger amount of savings right now, and you're going to get all of the benefits up front. Okay. There's a lot of pros and cons to it. So I would say that talk to your lender about the benefits. And if you want to run it by me, I'm happy to have a consultation with you. But temporary buy downs are a great option to front load your savings. But as you'll notice, because I did a video today, my weekly video, by the way, if you're not getting my weekly market updates, subscribe to it. You can go to subscribing at johnloneking.com or subscribing on YouTube at John Lone King. You'll get my weekly market update. Temporary buy downs are amazing. But just be aware, there's a certain point in time which it will come back to bite you. And we're starting to hit that point for some people. All right. So yes. So I think I can like a 2-1 buy down. So if you can get a 2-1 buy down, I'd rather take a 6% rate with a 2-1 buy down than a 5.5% permanent rate, because a 6% rate with a 2-1 buy down is 4% this year, 5% next year, and then 6% the year after that. And I'm banking on the fact that we're going to see lower interest rates in the next few years, low enough that you're going to refinance out of that anyway. Now, it's a gamble, it's a bet, but your worst case scenario is only 0.5% higher for the long term. So you've saved 2% for the first year and 1% the second year. That means you saved a total of 3% in the first 2 years, and your negative is you're 0.5% higher, which means it's going to take 6 years after that of keeping that loan at 6% before you're starting to be in a worse position than if you had taken the 5.5% rate from the beginning. So the 2-1 buy down is a great option that can help you in that situation. All right, gang, circling back to being a first-time home buyer, I'm going to do a quick summary. If you have any questions about anything, feel free again to post it into chat right now. First-time home buyer gives you some very, very clear benefits, but it is not the end-all be-all. It does not provide you with something significantly greater that you say, oh my gosh, I shouldn't buy a house until I'm a first-time home buyer again. There are some benefits, but there's also some loopholes. There's some differences in rules. And so if you have questions about what does it mean to be a first-time home buyer, to me, your best bet is to set up a one-on-one consultation. We'll do a phone or a Zoom call. I'll walk you through the home buying process. I also have my first-time home buyer masterclass. So I'm doing that next Thursday night. That's going to be the 22nd at 7 to 8:30 p.m. on Thursday the 22nd. You can go to How to Buy Masterclass. How, HOWTOBUY Masterclass. HowToBuyMasterclass.com, and you can sign up for my masterclass on, let me tell you, take a guess, how to buy a home. We just left a home out of the URL. So How to Buy Masterclass, sign up for it next week. I'm going to talk through a lot of these details that you need to know and help guide you through your home buying journey. So I appreciate you joining me today. Doesn't look like there's any other questions. So everybody, thank you for your time. Hope you have a nice holiday weekend, and we'll talk to y'all soon. Bye-bye.